To do my big pulpit voice this morning. Okay, I actually brought something additional with me this morning. You may know that it's Palm Sunday, which means next Sunday is Easter. So one question I have for you is, what do you see? This is kind of a famous one. And one of the things that influence what we see when we look at something, we just sort of assume everybody sees the same thing. Just like you can be an American citizen and feel like everyone feels the same way you do until there's an election. Right? We're usually not aware we're being influenced. Our interpretation of what we see happens quickly and unconsciously. So do you see a bunny looking to the right, or do you see a duck? A duck. Okay, so we got a vote here. It's going on. I'm telling you. All right, so when people were asked what they saw around Easter, 82% of them said they saw a bunny rabbit. Now, another group saw this picture in October. It was probably hunting season. And 90% of them saw a duck or another bird. So it's the same illustration. The exact same thing, but a different interpretation depending on the context. And while we understand that we can see pictures very differently and believe other people are seeing the same thing that we are, we forget that we can see the same behavior and interpret it very differently. This is especially true when it comes to our own experiences. There are stories that we tell. The story of how we met. The story of how we came to be here this morning all the way from San Antonio. And these stories of our experiences, we may not say them out loud, but we still tell stories in order to make sense of our experience. And some of these stories that we tell about ourselves bring laughter, and others bring tears. And when we change a story, we can change our life. A professor was looking at the fact that a significant number of college freshmen would get a bad grade their first semester, and then they would start to do worse and worse, and eventually drop out. So she wanted to see if she could do an intervention. First, she had to figure out the difference between those who got a bad grade in the first semester and dropped out by the end of the year, and those who got a bad grade the first semester and stuck it through. And she looked and found out that it boiled down to the student's own interpretation of what had happened and why. Now, the students who struggled and maybe dropped out tended to think that the bad grade really meant that they, were not college material after all, and the bad grade just proved it. The students who got a bad grade but overcame it, they took the bad grade as a sign that they just needed to study harder the next time. They took it for granted that they were college material. So it's the same event. Bad grade first semester, college freshman. But it's a different story as to what that bad grade meant. It's the difference between identity, well, this proves I'm a bad student, and effort. Well, this proves I need to put a little more effort in. So what predicts what? Now, my children, when they were little, scored highly in math tests, even though math wasn't their favorite subject. And my younger child came home one day from elementary school, and she just threw her stuff on the floor and said, "I'm bad at math." Well, now, I think she thought because her older brother knew more math than she did, but her older brother was 4 years older, so of course he knew more math than she did. But the younger daughter had this story, and the story was that she was just not very good at math. That was the story that she told herself. But in one of those rare strokes of fate, we had gotten a letter from the school district that very day with the results of her standardized tests. that very day. And her math score, which we showed her, said that she was in the 96th percentile. Well, that meant that she outscored 96% of the kids her age in the entire state of Missouri on math. So she had this story that she told about herself, and then we reminded her of some facts. And then her story began to change. And when her story changed, how she felt about herself changed. This is a big deal. The stories you tell yourself about yourself, whether you say them out loud or indirectly, form what is called the core narrative of your life. You are good or bad at math, or at cooking, or at public speaking. You tried ukulele once and loved it, and now you're in a string band. All these stories add up to form your core narrative. What's that? Something in you, if you're like most people, imagines that you are the star of the movie that is your life. Right? You're the center. Here's some, maybe there's a soundtrack. There's all these extras that are out there. People coming up, are they going to be evil or good? We'll find out. Now, you grew up in certain places. You had certain experiences. You came to be here right now in this present moment, this morning. There's a story to that. All of these experiences can have stories attached to them. Why am I wearing cufflinks with a three-headed dragon? I don't know off the top of my head, but I could tell you a story about that. We have these stories. You fell in love once, or maybe many times. You had a breakup, maybe a reunion. There are many stories that make up your core narrative. And some of these stories just make you feel bad. And you can forget. Or maybe you never really even stopped to remember. These are just stories. Just stories. And some of these stories, they're not even true. These stories that you're telling about yourself, they're not even true. Maybe you're really not bad at math or something else. And we carry these stories around and feel like they are an essential part of our identity. We can't get rid of these things, and that can cause us grief. Once upon a time, this would have been back in the late 20th century. So I was in my late 20s. I felt my life was stuck in a job I didn't like, but it paid the bills. It was a career I chose completely by accident, computer administration. Sounds pretty sexy, huh? And I had become vaguely aware that I was discontent, but I wasn't yet at the point where I was outright miserable, or at least miserable enough to make a significant change. I felt young. I felt I had plenty of time to grow up. There didn't seem to be any particular reason to drastically change my life, just this vague discontent. And then I had a near-death experience on an airplane, where everybody on the plane, including me, thought we were going to crash and die. And because of that experience, I went through a one-way door. Have you had an experience in your life where something huge happens and you realize you've just been walked through or been pushed, you're through a one-way door and you will not go back? Well, now everything's up for grabs, right? Forget this vague discontent stuff. And all of a sudden, with a painful yet unmistakable clarity, I realized I felt my life had no meaning and not much in the way of hope and a clear lack of purpose. Well, no wonder I didn't want to look at that. Ouch. And it seemed clear that I could no longer wait to grow up, because I had the sudden and unmistakable realization that tomorrow, it never comes. It's a story we tell ourselves. The past is a story we tell ourselves. What we have right now is the present moment. Tomorrow never comes. And that near-death experience was a sudden and unmistakable reminder that what we have is today, this moment. And so I knew I had to find a purpose in life, and that if I could find a purpose for my life, in my life, then I would find meaning. And if I had purpose, and if I had meaning, then I would have hope. Hope I didn't have, but desperately wanted. We tell stories about our experiences in order to make sense of them, and I did not have a good story about my near-death experience. It didn't make sense. I became phobic about flying. I didn't even like to go pick people up or drop them off at the airport. I would just get the heebie-jeebies. And I was going to lose my job as a traveling computer salesman and administrator, a job I didn't even like. And I had not developed any plans whatsoever about what to do next. I was afraid of running out of money. I had almost no savings. I had some credit card debt. Now what? I had no good story about how I ended up there, and no good story about what could happen next. Sometimes we have experiences and we don't have a good story, and not having a good story can be just as painful as the experience. And that was true for me at one point, and so life began to feel unsafe, unpredictable. We can get caught in a mental spiral of how everything tied to our identity, our day-to-day life, everything is becoming undone. And we feel ourselves sinking into a mess. A mess we feel we can't escape, we feel trapped, and all because of the stories we tell ourselves about the same set of facts. For you, it may not be or have been a near-death experience. Maybe it was the death of a spouse. Maybe it was a painful breakup with someone. Maybe you had the boss from hell and felt you had to leave a job you loved, and you can't seem to make sense of what happened. The bad experiences that linger on are ones that don't seem to make much sense. They can seem meaningless and random, and so we can spend time and energy trying to put them out of our minds, but frequently that doesn't work. So if you had a painful breakup or a boss from hell, it's important to give that a little time and distance. Don't try to relive the event right away. That'll just raise your blood pressure and put your mind going in circles and ruminating, trying to analyze things too quickly, which is sometimes what progressive people do, often has the opposite of the intended effect. But after you've got a little time and distance from the little or the big trauma, there's an exercise you can do. And if you're the kind of person who likes to write down the thing you got out of the service today, this is your opportunity. It's called the Pennebecker writing exercise. You don't have to write that part down. But it goes like this. You wait until you have some emotional distance from the problem, from the event. And you'll know when that is. You've got a little bit of emotional distance there. And then you write about it for 15 minutes every day for 3 or 4 days. Event happens, bad event. Wait till you get some emotional distance. Write about it 15 minutes a day, 3 or 4 days. And this simple way of making sense of confusing or upsetting episodes in our lives, it gives us an opportunity to get some closure, some perspective, and kind of like move on to the next thing in our life. So we get some emotional distance, we write for 15 minutes, 3 or 4 days in a row, and you can write a story about the event and why it occurred. Now remember, you are getting to write the story. So give yourself some leeway here about why it occurred. And as long as you're writing about it, and I found this particularly helpful, you can write about it in the third person. as if the event happened to someone else. So this guy, Daniel, late 20s, realizes his life in computer administration is over, feeling lost, no sense of meaning, hope, or purpose, decides to study world religions. Moves to Chicago, figures out what world religions have to say about meaning. What do world's religions have to say about purpose? What do world religions have to say about hope? Go to seminary, that's where you study world religions. So get this, he ends up going to seminary. Well, now what is he going to do? Went to seminary, he's got student loan debt, so he becomes a minister. A UU minister for 22 years until, well, he's asked to leave the ministry because some people think he is the world's worst boss. So after 22 years, another dark night of the soul. But he's been through this before. He discovers new meaning, a new opportunity, new purpose, new hope. When you change your story, you change how you feel about that story. You change how you feel about yourself. Oh, I'm terrible at math. No, you're not. Okay, maybe I feel better about myself now. So maybe you had the boss from hell, but maybe your story changes. Instead of the boss from hell yelling at you unfairly, you step back and ask why, and you come up with this. I see now that my boss's anger had more to do with his impending divorce than with anything about me. And now that I think about it, I have to admit that I could have done a slightly better job on that report. You take the same facts, but you tell a more positive story. And if you do, you'll experience, more than likely, less negativity and keep better blood pressure, probably not tick the people around you that you care about off as much. It's a simple thing to do. Get some distance, write about it, 15 minutes a day, 3 or 4 days, change your story. This changes how you feel. It's a simple thing to do, but you have to remember to do it. So next time a reminder, an anniversary of an upsetting event comes, try to take a step back and analyze it from a distance. That's story editing. Same facts, different story. But reimagining a painful event isn't the only thing we can do. We can be proactive too. When I went through my dark night of the soul, it seemed to me that there were huge gaps in my life. I was lacking a sense of meaning, a sense of purpose, a sense of hope. And I came to be aware that I felt my life had no meaning. And I'd felt that way for a long time, but hadn't paid any attention to it, because why pay attention to something that's painful that you don't have any immediate intention of changing? So let me ask you a deeply personal question. Do you feel you have a handle on the meaning of your life? Do you have a rough, hopefully comfortable idea of your place in the world? Do you feel you have a handle on a sense of purpose right now in your life? Not the last 50 years, but what's going on right now? And if you feel grounded in meaning and purpose, you will have a decent measure of hope and happiness. And when you feel a solid sense of the meaning of your one wild and precious life, and when you've built a sense of purpose for your life, you have the core narrative, the grand story of who you are and your place in the universe. And if you have these things, you have hope. You have hope. And building hope into your life helps you cope with the inevitable trouble that comes and goes like the tide. When you have meaning, you know who you are. And when you have purpose and meaning, you will know what to do. There are things you can do to build meaning and hope and purpose, things you could do today It turns out that one of the best ways to build meaning and hope and purpose is to be a doer of good deeds. A good deed doer. You do good in order to be good. It turns out that one of the best ways to build meaning, hope, and purpose is to be that good deed doer. So a lot of times people think, oh, well, it's courageous people who show courage. That's not actually how it works, in my experience. It's when you do act out of courage repeatedly, you become a courageous person. People adopt a new behavior, such as doing volunteer work, which triggers a tentative revision in their core narrative. Well, I guess I am the kind of person who really cares about my community, thinks a new volunteer at the shelter. This means we're likely to keep doing volunteer work or be helpful in other ways until one day you have a new element to your core narrative. You are a volunteer. You are someone helpful. You are someone people can count on. And you show up as a greeter, even if it's late, because we can count on you. Volunteering leads to transformation in our own lives and the lives of those we interact with. It's particularly important, volunteering is, for children and youth. When my younger child, the one who thought she was bad at math, started high school, she was perfectly capable of making her own breakfast and of walking to the school bus stop. But I knew someday she will be all grown up and move away. And if there's a relationship I wanted to develop, then I had to do it when the opportunity was ready, not when I was ready. And so I got up most weekday mornings, 5:30 or so. I made her breakfast. I drove her to and from the bus stop, mostly a quiet time. And frequently the bus was either going to be very late or perhaps not show up at all. Particularly when the rodeo's in town, a lot of the bus drivers just quit and go get a job with the rodeo. You'd think the school district would learn from this, but no, like clockwork. And so there's all these kids and they're stranded, and I would say to another kid, like, well, text your parents, and if it's okay, you can hop in the car. It's a big car. And so, okay, now I'm expanding my good deed for the day. This is cool. Now, if you stop and think about it, you might think that, well, some dad getting to fix a little breakfast and then driving to a bus stop or a school is no big deal. In fact, it seems pretty low on the bar as far as quality parenting goes. And of course, you're right. But it was a big deal to me because I did not have that growing up. And because I wanted to be a good person. And doing small acts of ordinary kindness is a way to be a good person. You just are not a good person. You do good things. And it changes your core narrative. And it wasn't until she got to college that she realized not all her friends had dads who would get up at 5:30 to fix breakfast and drive them to school. And when she got to the University of Houston, guess what major she picked? Math. Yeah, math. And she graduated and has a great job in Houston doing data analysis for some oil company's marketing campaign. But she got it because of her math degree, which might never have happened had she stuck with the story that she wasn't good at math. When you change your story, you can change your life. I hope for me, I hope for you, is that we accept each other as we are, and we encourage ourselves to become the people that we say we want to be. And so let us seek little ways to transform ourselves, to transform our communities, and to transform our world. Let us just take one more step. Amen.